My name is Clara, and this all started almost 2 years ago. My best friend, Isla, and I had known each other since high school. She was the wild one, the one who always pushed boundaries, while I was the one who made excuses for her. Over time, I learned that sometimes you make excuses for people not because they deserve it, but because you're scared of what happens if you stop. Isla married a great guy named Nolan. He was calm, patient, and honestly too good for her. But I stayed out of it. People make their choices, and I thought maybe Isla would finally settle down. I was wrong. The first time I found out Isla was cheating was on a random Tuesday night. I had gone to meet her at a bar. She texted me last minute saying she couldn't make it, so I decided to grab a drink alone. That's when I saw her, across the room, kissing a man who was definitely not Nolan. His name was Cade, and I recognized him from her old college group. I froze. I debated whether to confront her, but I didn't. I went home, tossed and turned all night, and the next morning, she called me like nothing had happened. I said nothing. Weeks went by, then months. I kept her secret. Every time we met, I wondered if she knew I had seen her, but she never mentioned anything, and I convinced myself it wasn't my business. But that wasn't the only incident. There was the time we went on a weekend trip with friends. Nolan stayed home because of work. Isla sneaked out of our cabin at midnight and didn't come back until morning. I pretended to sleep when she stumbled in, smelling of cologne that wasn't Nolan's. There was another time she accidentally sent me a photo meant for someone else. A hotel room selfie in lingerie with the caption, "Counting the minutes." I knew it wasn't for her husband. I deleted it and said nothing. Each time I kept quiet, it ate at me. But Isla was my best friend. I didn't want to be the one to blow up her marriage. Then, something happened that made me question everything. My boyfriend, Ethan, and I had been dating for over a year. Things were good, stable, happy, and honest. At least that's what I thought. Until Isla started making weird comments. Little digs. Telling me that Ethan had a wandering eye. That she'd seen him checking out other girls. She would say it lightly, like a joke, but her tone always had that edge. First, I ignored it, but then she started pushing harder. She claimed she overheard Ethan talking to someone suspiciously on the phone. She hinted that maybe I should go through his messages. It didn't feel like concern. It felt like she wanted me to distrust him. I started feeling paranoid. One night, after too many glasses of wine, I asked Ethan if there was something he needed to tell me. He was confused. He swore there wasn't. I believed him, but I couldn't help wondering, why was Isla trying to stir the pot? I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. After Isla's constant digs about Ethan, I tried to brush it off, but something in me stayed uneasy. I knew Ethan well, or at least I thought I did, and I never had reason to doubt him before. But Isla's comments had planted seeds. And once they're there, they grow. I started noticing how Isla seemed to go out of her way to mention Ethan. She'd drop his name into conversations unnecessarily. Once, when we went shopping, she offhandedly said, "Ethan's been working late a lot, hasn't he?" I never told her that. She was fishing. The strangest moment was at a barbecue Nolan hosted. It was one of those laid-back afternoons, and Isla had obviously been drinking. I caught her staring at Ethan, not just glancing, but really staring. It made me uncomfortable. Later that night, she joked with me in private that if I ever broke up with Ethan, she'd totally swoop in. I laughed awkwardly, but something about the way she said it didn't feel like a joke at all. Meanwhile, Isla's own life was a mess, though only I knew it. She wasn't just cheating with Cade anymore. Over time, I noticed new names popping up. There was Jeremy, a coworker. Lucas, a gym trainer. She kept bragging in texts about how she still had it, how easy it was to get attention. I didn't respond. One day, I met Isla for coffee. She was on her phone the entire time, texting and smirking. Then, casually, she said, "You sure you trust Ethan? He was at Willow's Lounge last Friday." That caught me off guard. I knew he was out with coworkers, but Willow's Lounge was more of a singles bar. I asked Ethan about it later. He told me his team went there after dinner because another place was full. He even showed me photos from that night. I tried to believe him, but the doubt had settled. Things escalated when Isla sent me an anonymous message from a fake number. I knew it was her. The phrasing gave it away. It said, "Your boyfriend isn't who you think he is." I was furious. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started watching her more closely. Then came the night that changed everything. Nolan called me in a panic. Isla wasn't home, and he couldn't reach her. He asked if I knew where she was. I lied and said I hadn't heard from her. But I knew exactly where she was. I drove to a motel on the edge of town, the same one I had passed by so many times and ignored. This time I parked and waited. After almost an hour, Isla came out. Not with Cade or Jeremy or Lucas, but with Nolan's business partner, Carter. I sat in my car, watching, feeling sick. I had protected her for too long, but I wasn't going to protect her anymore. After I saw Isla walk out of that motel with Carter, I sat in my car for a long time, trying to process what I had just witnessed. It wasn't just another random fling. This was Nolan's business partner, someone Nolan trusted, someone who could destroy not only his marriage but his career. I felt a surge of guilt. All those times I stayed silent, thinking I was being loyal to my friend. Maybe I was really just enabling her to wreck more lives. I went home that night feeling heavy. Ethan noticed immediately. He asked if I was okay. But I didn't tell him. Not yet. I was still trying to figure out what to do. The next morning, Isla texted me like nothing had happened. She asked if I wanted to join her for brunch. I declined. I couldn't even look at her right then. But staying silent wasn't going to work anymore. I decided to start gathering everything. Not because I planned to expose her yet, but because I wanted to have proof if and when the time came. I saved old texts, screenshots, and photos. In the following weeks, Isla's behavior became more erratic. She became colder toward me, almost suspicious. She must have sensed something had changed. Her comments about Ethan became sharper. She even hinted to Nolan during a double date that Ethan was too friendly with the waitress. I watched Ethan's confused face, and I wanted to scream. I realized then, she was trying to ruin my relationship. Maybe because I had stopped blindly supporting her. Maybe because she knew I was pulling away. Or maybe just because misery loves company. Things escalated again when Isla showed up at Ethan's office. She claimed she was just in the area and brought him coffee. He told me about it later, laughing it off. But I knew exactly what she was doing. Then came the tipping point. Isla threw a small party at her house. I didn't want to go, but Nolan personally invited me and Ethan. We showed up, and from the moment we arrived, Isla kept finding excuses to pull Ethan aside. At one point, I caught her leaning too close, touching his arm unnecessarily. Ethan looked uncomfortable. Later, when I confronted Isla privately in the kitchen, all she said was, "If you can't keep him, maybe you shouldn't blame me when he slips." That was it. The next morning, I called Nolan. I didn't tell him everything, just that I needed to meet, in person. I wasn't ready to burn it all down yet, but I was done keeping her secrets. And Nolan deserved to know what kind of person he had married. When I met Nolan, I could tell he already suspected something. He was pale, tense, and spoke quietly, like someone who was afraid to hear the answers. We met at a quiet park. I thought I would just give him the pieces and let him decide what to do, but the words tumbled out of me faster than I expected. I told him about the night I saw Isla at the motel with Carter. I told him about the other men, the late nights sneaking out on trips, the lingerie selfie sent by mistake, the constant lies. I stopped short of telling him about her trying to interfere with Ethan. That was my battle. Nolan didn't react much. He just stared into the distance, nodding slowly. Then he thanked me. He said, "I had a feeling, but I didn't want to believe it." A few days later, I heard from mutual friends that Nolan had left the house and was staying with his brother. Isla called me in tears, saying Nolan was being distant, and she couldn't figure out why. I didn't say anything. I just listened. That week, Isla became more unhinged. She showed up at my apartment unexpectedly. She claimed Nolan was acting cold and that she thought he might be cheating on her. The irony almost made me laugh. But then she turned on me. She accused me of turning people against her. She said, "You think you're so perfect with Ethan? But don't forget, men are men. They all stray eventually." I stayed calm. I told her she should focus on her own marriage. That must have struck a nerve because she stormed out. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. That Isla would either come clean or Nolan would quietly file for divorce. But I underestimated Isla. A week later, Ethan received an anonymous message. It claimed I had been spreading lies about Isla because I was having an affair with someone at work and wanted to deflect attention. Ethan showed me the message. He laughed and said, "This is ridiculous." But I could tell just for a moment he wondered. I had had enough. I called Isla. She didn't answer. So I sent her a message. "I've protected you long enough. If you keep coming for me, I will expose everything. Every detail." I thought that would stop her. Instead, she doubled down. The next day, Ethan's mother called me, asking if it was true that I had problems with fidelity. Isla had gotten to her. That night, Ethan and I had a serious conversation. I told him everything. About Isla's affairs, about her attempts to sabotage us, about how long I'd stayed silent. He believed me, but the damage Isla had tried to inflict was clear. And then, the twist I didn't expect. Nolan messaged me. He said he was ready. He wanted me to help him expose her. Publicly. He was done playing it quietly. Nolan and I met again, this time with a plan. He wasn't just hurt anymore, he was angry. And he wanted Isla to feel what she had done. Not just to him, but to everyone around her. We decided not to confront her privately. Isla was the kind of person who could twist a quiet conversation into a story that made her the victim. She thrived on rewriting the truth. So we agreed public exposure. No room for denial, no half-truths. Nolan started gathering his own evidence. He already had access to credit card statements, hotel bookings, and suspicious charges that lined up with the time she claimed to be out with the girls or working late. I shared everything I had, the screenshots, the photos, the texts. He combined them into a neat file. And then he told me his plan. Isla's birthday was coming up. She had planned a big party, inviting family, friends, and even some of Nolan's business partners. It was supposed to be her perfect night, with everyone praising her, posting photos, calling her the beautiful, successful wife. Nolan was going to make it the night everything fell apart. Leading up to the party, Isla continued her attacks. She started spreading rumors about me in our mutual social circles. People began treating me differently. Some distanced themselves. A few sent awkward messages asking if everything was okay between me and Ethan. I wanted to scream. I was losing friends, facing whispers and judgment. All because I had tried to protect someone who didn't deserve it. But I kept quiet. I knew what was coming. A few days before the party, Nolan asked if I was ready for what might happen. He warned me that Isla could lash out at everyone, that she'd likely try to drag me down with her. But I didn't care anymore. She had already tried to ruin my relationship, my reputation. And for what? The night of the party arrived. Isla was radiant, surrounded by people who still thought she was the perfect wife, the perfect hostess. Nolan played along, smiling, hugging her, making small talk. I stood in a corner, heart pounding. Just before the cake, Nolan tapped his glass. The room quieted. Everyone turned toward him, expecting a sweet birthday toast. Instead, he said, "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. But before we celebrate, I have something to share." He pulled out his phone, connected it to the screen behind him, and pressed play. The room filled with silence, then whispers, then gasps. Photos of Isla with different men. Hotel bills. Screenshots of texts. Every secret, every betrayal laid bare. Isla's face froze in shock. She looked around the room as people began murmuring, pulling out their phones, taking photos of the screen. Nolan didn't yell. He simply said, "For anyone who still wonders why I've left, now you know." He walked out, and Isla, she crumbled. But it wasn't over yet. The room was chaos after Nolan left. Some guests quietly excused themselves. Others stayed, whispering and staring. Isla stood frozen in the middle of it all. Her perfect birthday party shattered in seconds. I stayed by the wall, watching her unravel. Her parents tried to comfort her, but she pushed them away. A few of her so-called close friends slipped out the door, probably eager to distance themselves from the mess. I thought she'd run after Nolan or try to salvage the situation. But instead, Isla did what I should have expected. She turned on me. She pointed at me across the room and yelled, "This was you! You did this!" Everyone turned. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Nolan's evidence had spoken loud enough. Isla stormed toward me, screaming, calling me a backstabber, a jealous snake, saying I always wanted her life. Her voice cracked. Her mascara ran. The confident, manipulative woman I'd known for years was gone, replaced by someone desperate and broken. I quietly left the party. Ethan was waiting in the car. He squeezed my hand and told me I did the right thing. But I didn't feel victorious. I just felt empty. The next few days were pure drama. Isla tried to spin the story. First, she claimed the photos were old, from before her marriage. Then she said they were doctored. But nobody believed her. Nolan had timed everything too perfectly. Mutual friends stopped calling her. Family members took Nolan's side. Even Carter, Nolan's business partner and one of Isla's affairs, cut ties with her to save his career. But Isla wasn't done lashing out. She started spreading a new rumor, that I had been the one sleeping with Nolan, that I'd been jealous of her all along and had plotted to ruin her life because I wanted both Nolan and Ethan. It was absurd. But lies travel fast. I found myself defending my name to people I barely knew. Ethan stood by me the whole time, but I could feel the tension. The trust between us had been shaken by months of manipulation and rumors. Then Isla did something I never saw coming. She showed up at Ethan's work. She cornered him in the parking lot and told him I had once confessed feelings for him behind Isla's back. She told him I had wanted him all along and that this entire revenge plot was because I couldn't have him. Ethan told me later that he didn't believe a word of it. But hearing her say it out loud, watching her take her destruction one step further, made me realize something. Isla wasn't trying to save herself anymore. She just wanted to destroy everyone who knew the truth. And I knew she wasn't finished yet. The fallout from Nolan's reveal continued to ripple through every part of my life. I had underestimated just how far Isla would go once cornered. Her story about me supposedly being in love with Ethan picked up traction in the worst way. People started whispering not just about her, but about me. Mutual friends sent me half-hearted texts like, "I hope you and Ethan are okay. I heard some things. It hurt more than I thought it would." I had spent years building my reputation as loyal and honest. Now, in a matter of days, Isla had poisoned it. And then came the worst blow. Ethan's parents invited us to dinner, under the guise of clearing the air. The moment we arrived, I could tell it wasn't going to be a normal meal. His mother barely looked me in the eye. His father was polite but distant. Halfway through dinner, Ethan's mom asked bluntly, "Is there anything you need to confess before this gets more out of hand?" I sat there stunned. Ethan immediately defended me, telling them Isla was lying, but I could see it. The seed of doubt had been planted in them too. Afterward, in the car, Ethan held my hand and apologized. He said he trusted me, but trust felt fragile now, like thin glass stretched too tight. Meanwhile, Nolan had gone silent. I think he needed to get away from the disaster he detonated. I didn't blame him. He left the city for a while, staying with family out of state. But Isla stayed, and she doubled down on destroying me. She began posting vague but venomous things on social media. Never trust the person who smiles in your face but wants your life behind your back. People speculated. Screenshots flew around. Even people I barely knew messaged me asking if the drama was about me. Felt like drowning. And then Isla crossed the final line. I woke up one morning to find fake screenshots circulating in group chats. Faked text messages that looked like conversations between me and Nolan. Messages where I was supposedly confessing my feelings for him, calling Isla trash. Even saying I wished I had her life. My phone blew up. Even people who knew me well were confused. Ethan asked me if I'd seen them. His face was pale. He said, "I know they're fake, but this is a mess." I broke down. Years of friendship, trust, loyalty, all twisted into something disgusting. That night, I made a decision. I called Isla. She didn't pick up, so I left her a voicemail. My voice was shaking, but I was clear. You've tried to ruin me. I've been quiet. I've protected you, but I'm done. You can lie to everyone else, but I have the truth. And I promise, they're going to hear it. And then I called Nolan. I asked him if he was ready for the last step. He said, absolutely. Let's end this. Nolan returned to the city 2 days later. He was calm. Too calm. Like someone who had already buried the pain and was ready to clean up the wreckage. We met at a quiet cafe, away from anyone who might overhear. I showed him the fake screenshots Isla had made. His jaw tightened, but he wasn't surprised. He told me, I knew she wouldn't go quietly. We agreed this couldn't just fade out with whispers and damage control. Isla was still manipulating, still destroying lives, and she needed to be stopped for good. Nolan had one final card to play: recorded conversations. Months ago, when he first suspected Isla's infidelity, he had started recording some of their tense conversations. In them, she admitted to cheating more than once. She laughed about how easily people believed her. In one recording, she even mentioned how she could turn anyone against anyone if they crossed her. And most importantly, she admitted to fabricating lies about me, just in case she ever needed to. We packaged all of it. Nolan sent the evidence anonymously to a gossip blog that thrived on scandal. The same blog Isla herself had often fed stories to in the past about other people's secrets. Within 24 hours, the story exploded. The blog published Isla's recordings, the screenshots, her fake messages, and the timeline of her betrayals. It was brutal. People who had once defended her now turned their backs. Comments flooded in. She's a monster. I feel so bad for Nolan. How could she do that to her best friend? Isla tried to deny it at first, but the audio clips were undeniable. Her voice, her laughter, her cruelty, all laid bare for the world. The final nail in the coffin came when one of her old flings, not Carter, but another man, publicly confirmed it all, saying she'd even bragged about manipulating her stupid friend, me, and how she could destroy marriages for fun. It was over. Within days, Isla deleted all her social media. She resigned from her job. Her parents stopped defending her publicly. Her name became synonymous with betrayal and lies. I thought I'd feel relief, but what I really felt was exhaustion. I sat down with Ethan one night after the storm had cleared. I told him, I need to step away from all of this for a while. He understood. We booked a trip, just the two of us, to somewhere quiet, far away. Before we left, I received one last message. From Isla. Just 4 words: I hope you're happy. I didn't respond, because it was never about happiness or revenge. It was about finally putting an end to years of lies and cleaning up the mess she left behind. And when the plane lifted off, taking me away from that chaos, I realized, sometimes the best ending isn't dramatic or explosive. It's simply peace. The kind that comes after the storm.